Who is stealing our energy? Where does our energy go? And how has our energy changed? And how will it change even more in the near future? Today, we're going to talk about chakras, about how we can initiate and unlock our true potential. Greetings to everyone. My name is Yuri, and today we're going to start digging deep into this topic. This will be an open lecture for everyone, where today you will be able to learn a lot of new things, first and foremost about yourself. After all, we know about our hands, our feet, and the senses that we have. You have eyes, ears, a heart, lungs, and other vital organs. But most people know almost nothing about what their soul is made of, or how their soul interacts with the surrounding space. You look at the physical world and mostly see just that. But what if there is also a subtle plane, an invisible plane, and it is also actively interacting with us right now and directly influencing our lives? Sometimes a person may not feel very well at all, and there are no obvious physical signs or discernible reasons for this feeling, but it truly seems like the underlying cause or origin comes from somewhere else entirely, perhaps from an unseen or less apparent source. So today let's try to answer many of these questions. Do these chakras really exist? How are they actually structured? After all, I'm not the kind of person who just dogmatically believes in what is passed down or written in books. I scoured the entire internet in search of information about chakras and found every book available on energy, biofields, and also began practicing on my own. And when my clairvoyance opened up, I clearly began to see that chakras are much more than what is written about them online, much more than what is described in books. And in fact, many profound masters who have truly reached a very high level, as well as numerous masters from ancient India, possess a much deeper knowledge about the intricate chakra system than they currently reveal. And this is very interesting. But at this point, a new chakra system has already been revealed to us from the quantum space in a completely updated form and with a renewed understanding. In the course of my research over many years on the chakra system, I have managed to make some amazing discoveries that are especially helpful in explaining the chakra system not as some kind of delusion, but from the perspective of its interconnection with the biological states of the body, with physical conditions, with the quantum field, and with the bioplasma that forms us and from which our bodies are created. Today we will have a lecture on this topic. Sometimes I'll be writing, sometimes drawing, so it will be very interesting. This is an open lecture as part of our Academy of Multidimensional Evolution. And I am very glad to welcome you all. You can subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in the description or via this QR code. Tell me, how many times a day do you think about your energy fields? Do you practice every day to strengthen them? For some reason, people really love gyms and all sorts of physical activities. But for some reason, very few people think about their energy. Do you brush your teeth every day? Yes, every day. But do you cleanse your energy every day? Do you work with your energy? Most people's energy fields resemble a kind of gray, dirty amoeba that also smells bad and has lots of holes. And because of this, many people experience unpleasant states. Today we will look at the reasons for this and how these negative states affect us. If a person's energy is weakened, if their field is weak, then many people immediately start asking questions about entities. Oh my God, there are so many different astral entities, subtle plane entities around us. And many channelers have said, that's it, there will be no more dark entities. Now everyone has come, they've removed everything from everyone, everything has already been cleansed. But in practice, we see that it's not quite like that. People who actually have clairvoyance can clearly see everything that's going on. And just like them, I can clearly see what's happening to people right now. And indeed, there are certain forces that are capable of draining our energy, that are able to influence us. But there's no need to panic. There are some very important recommendations, some very important tips that I will give you right here in this broadcast, which can help you avoid all these potential problems, let go of all these hooks, attachments, and all kinds of parasitic entities. Because here we will examine parasitic entities from the perspective of their classification. I usually haven't talked about this, and this topic tends to really scare people. We will lift the shadow of fear and take a look at what's inside from the perspective of a clairvoyant, from the perspective of a professional. In other words, what do we see? What do I see when I interact with people, when I observe their subtle fields? and accordingly, what is the most effective way to solve these problems. Because as practice shows, all these cleansings like using salt, waving some smoke around, or moving a little flame around yourself, these aren't always effective. Today, my assistant and I will be answering your questions. He's already reading your chat and will be collecting the most important and interesting questions, but only on this topic. And the most important and interesting questions, those that are formulated in a way that's useful for everyone, we will read out loud. We won't be reading out questions of a personal nature, like what are my chakras? Or, for example, if my friend is always arguing, what are her chakras like? So please try to avoid personal questions as much as possible and instead ask broader questions that concern everyone. Because I address personal questions with you during individual consultations, and when working with the energy space and during lectures, I focus on general questions. We will discuss what these entities attach to, how to detach them, and how to learn to eliminate the root cause. Because people who practice energy work, and even the practitioners themselves who supposedly work with energy, often just cut off these entities, perform some kind of magical ritual, but it still doesn't help because after a while, everything comes back again. Because the initial understanding of what the root cause is incorrect. And the root cause goes much deeper. Today, you will also learn about my discovery regarding the chakra system. What the chakra system actually is and how it is connected to the quanta of the periodic table. As a chemist by education, I discovered a very interesting connection between the periodic table and the chakras. And today we will see this connection together. And I think many of you will be amazed at how fascinatingly interconnected it all is. But for now, let's start from the beginning. We've touched on many topics today. And to begin with, I would like to say that studying and exploring the chakra system is the study and exploration of the evolutionary path of the spirit and soul. Just as the entire spectrum of vibrations is born from the primordial light of the Creator, so too do our chakras, each with their own vibrations and states, project themselves into our reality. And essentially, even in the old traditional understanding of the chakra system as it was commonly perceived, it already demonstrates how our structure evolves. That is, from less developed zones and chakras to more developed ones. But it should be said right away that there are no lower chakras, no bad chakras, no destructive chakras, and no chakras that are worse than others. All chakras are very important. And I'll even give you real-life examples of what happened to people who didn't develop their lower chakras. It's honestly astonishing. Just recently, this situation became especially clear to me with one of my acquaintances who simply, well, I won't tell you what happened to him until we've studied the topic of chakras together. So closer to the end, you'll find out what can happen to people who practice chakras incorrectly. And by the way, I'll answer questions about Kundalini, about how to raise Kundalini, how people who practice Kriyas artificially raise Kundalini and how they affect their own energy field. Is this good or bad for their health and psychological development? To begin with, traditionally we distinguish 7 main chakras, right? These are Muladhara, Svadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, Ajna, and Sahasrara. Each of these chakras is associated with a certain type of energy. In addition to these chakras, we also have additional ones. Overall, I identified 12 main chakras that are currently accessible to us within the scope of what we are about to study together. We will study these main 7 chakras and look at how they interact and how they are interconnected. If you search for information on the internet, you will most likely find almost exactly the same things copied across different websites. And there it will simply say that the first chakra is the chakra responsible for survival. The second chakra is the one responsible for pleasure. And some say it's about sex, which is a very rough oversimplification and does not reflect reality. Svadhisthana is not the sex chakra, as people say. And Muladhara is not just a survival chakra, as people claim. These are very, very important centers. So what are they ultimately? Let's first define what a chakra actually is. Each chakra is essentially a part of our soul. Just like you have organs in your body, you have digestive organs and they have their own function. You have respiratory organs and they have their own function. There are organs of the cardiovascular system and of the nervous system. And each organ system is responsible for something and controls certain functions, right? So what if our soul also has some kind of energy structure organs? What do I mean by soul? By soul, I generally mean the sum of all our subtle bodies. That is, our etheric, atomic, buddhic, astral, and mental fields, all united as one. They themselves are the sum of all the subtle bodies. As a collection of subtle bodies, our etheric shells also contain various organs, and different energies flow between them. Just as our physical body has a variety of organ structures, our soul's organs have a similar diversity in their structure. We don't know anything about them at all. It's not customary to discuss them at all. And some people even say that the nature of our soul is completely unclear, that we don't know what it's made of. Psychology studies individual manifestations of the psyche, but it doesn't systematize them into a single unified system. However, when I began studying psychology, psychoanalysis, and other branches of psychology, I immediately developed a clear understanding that a huge interconnection has been overlooked here. There is a definite, clear relationship between how a child's psyche is formed from childhood and how the chakras are formed. And if you know what stage you are currently at, which chakra you are stuck on, which chakra you need to activate at this moment, then you can move forward in your evolution in the most effective way. Because sometimes people who strive for spiritual development, and you, my dear ones, are not here by accident. If you are on my channel, you are not just listeners who hang their ears for entertainment, right? Ears just for fun. You are really here in order to, first of all, benefit from what we are doing. This session is for you. Enjoy it and try to listen as attentively as possible to each topic and each question, and share this video with everyone who might be interested. And even if people are not into esotericism, you can recommend it to them as well. Because the chakra system is a model of perception. And now, an important remark. What we are studying is not how the world actually works, and that everyone should believe only this and nothing else. It's about how we choose to perceive this system. So if someone wants to argue with me in the comments and say, oh no, Yuri, you're wrong. Chakras actually look different, like this and like that. I've talked to many clairvoyants who can see chakras, and I asked them this question, how do you see chakras? I asked everyone the same question. Some said, I see funnels. Another said, I just see little spheres like this. A third person sees chakras as flower petals. I ask them how they spin, which direction they're facing, and they show me, for example, one says they spin clockwise. Another says counterclockwise. A third says there are no spheres at all. The fourth says there are no funnels, I only see spheres. And when I started asking clairvoyance questions, I realized that each person sees chakras in their own unique way, and this depends on quantum laws, which we will discuss further. But there are certain patterns. The traditional ancient chakra system, which is widely spread throughout India, let me show you this fascinating system, now implies the significant presence of numerous petals. And there the chakras are arranged in a certain order, and each chakra has petals as if it were a flower, right? Actually, the word chakra comes from the concept of a spinning wheel. And when people talk about the petals of chakras, usually, well, they don't explain them. That is, what each specific petal is responsible for is unclear, even though they sometimes draw a connection between chakras and specific organs, right? And here, there is a direct connection. For example, if you have certain illnesses, you can restore your body, heal it, and correct these conditions by working with a particular chakra, because it's possible that the cause of the illness lies in the energetic space. What is now called psychosomatics in modern psychology, that is, the connection between the psyche and changes in the state of the body, with illnesses directly related to the chakra system. And when people say, oh, my hormones are out of balance, oh, someone is taking hormonal medications, all sorts of drugs for mental states, sedatives. You are simply trying to suppress the energy of your chakras in order to break the connection between your soul and your body. This is not necessary. There is no need to interfere with this system if you properly align your chakras. Each chakra has a different number of petals. In the traditional Indian system, they distinguish 4 petals for the Muladhara, 6 petals for the Svadhisthana, and 10 petals for the Manipura. And what did I find out? That this number of petals has changed. At the moment, it does not correspond to the numbers described in those ancient texts. Moreover, the information that has reached us through the texts has been distorted. And when I connected with my higher self and accessed the memory of my past lives when I myself incarnated on Earth, including the times when during my incarnations I participated in transmitting this information to Earthlings, coming to India and sharing knowledge about the chakras back then. As guides, we would tell people one thing, they would understand something completely different, write down a third version and draw a fourth. And what has reached us now is already the 10th version. You see, it's already very, very different from what we originally put into the chakra system, into that understanding. So to avoid any arguments, the chakra system is a model of perception. If we choose this model of perception to understand the relationship between a person's psyche and their spirit, we begin to realize at which specific stage a person is. If someone is at the stage of a particular chakra but tries to reach higher, nothing good will come of it. For example, many people think we're so spiritual, we need to focus on spirituality. They meditate all day long, meditate, but they have no foundation. In other words, they try to convince themselves that they want to set an intention to open their clairvoyance, to start healing people with their hands. For what purpose? Well, I want to heal people with my hands so that they pay me money for it. Wait a minute. All right. So you want to make money? Then honestly, no, I want to help people. Let's be honest with ourselves, okay? We shouldn't deny the basics, the things everything is built and founded on. For example, if we take the first chakra, the Muladhara, what is it responsible for? It's not just responsible for us being able to live consciously in this life. It's not exactly about survival. Obviously, survival is important. Life, shelter, safety, comfort. And first and foremost, this is connected to having basic comfortable conditions and not feeling like a wolf is going to eat you tomorrow. That's clear. But there are also aspects like being grounded. The first chakra is responsible for adequacy. And people who develop schizophrenia nowadays, there are a lot of schizophrenics on the internet, especially on YouTube, schizophrenics who broadcast on YouTube, and I am, or was, acquainted with several of them. Let me tell you this story now. 5 years ago, I met a channeler in person and we started communicating. We even traveled together for a while, planned a joint retreat, and things like that. We had many plans to create an academy, we were planning to collaborate. This channeler had already fully proven to me that he had abilities. And since I also had abilities, I looked at his chakras and immediately saw that he had a certain problem. His first 3 chakras were very poorly developed, namely the Muladhara, Svadhisthana, and Manipura. So, what are they responsible for? The Muladhara is responsible for grounding, for the sense of safety and comfort. The Svadhisthana is responsible for the feeling of pleasure in life. So it's not about sex, but enjoying life. Pleasure from everything. Manipura is responsible for understanding your personality, your ego, right? And his energy flow there is very weak. But he's always meditating, flying off into some kind of heavenly dimensions. And we ended up having an argument. I told him, please, I won't mention his name. I said, please, when you do your meditations with your groups, I hear everything. I see what you're doing. Do grounding exercises. Do you understand? Grounding is important. You really need to do it every day. Your first 3 chakras are weakened. If you let them go, you lose your mind. Do you understand that? He says, I don't need that anymore. I'm flying in the 5th dimension, it's so easy for me. I don't like this earthly energy. Earth energy is something bad. Negative, it's low vibrational. I don't want to connect with the earth. So he had some misconceptions about the earth and earth energy, and as a result, he absolutely didn't want to do it. We argued about this, and in the end, when we finally had falling out over this and stopped communicating. For several years I kept trying to reach out because he didn't want to have any contact with me. A different opinion for him is, as they say, like a knife to the heart. He does not accept other opinions. But when I finally managed to get in touch and talk well, not really talk, just send a single message. This happened just recently, literally a week ago. I managed to send one message and it was read. Recalling our friendship, remembering all the good things that happened, apologizing for all the bad things that occurred. In response, I received some strange message. It wasn't even clear who it was addressed to, something like, June is a time of certain energies. Right now, karmic transformations are happening. I kept reading it and thinking, who is this even for? There was no greeting, nothing like, hi, no Yura, nothing at all. So it was unclear who it was for, what it was about, what the logic was supposed to be. I thought, maybe it's an automatically sent message. Then I kept reading and noticed clear lapses in logic, the kind you see with schizophrenia. And I realized that's it. I'm here trying to reach out. I'm trying to knock on doors where there's no one left behind them. There's no personality there anymore, no person. There's just no one left. It's just a shell and some floating energy. There's no soul left. It's just some kind of abstractionism that has no connection to reality. This is what happens when the first chakra is destroyed. Once the first chakra is destroyed, a person loses their mind. People whose first chakra is destroyed start experiencing paranoid states. For example, oh my god, there's a conspiracy all around. We have to be afraid of everything. Everyone is deceiving us. Everyone is lying. You know, all that stuff about chemtrails and so on. When people are extremely frightened, when they believe they can't influence anything, that everyone is watching them, that secret governments are constantly trying to destroy or poison them, that is a direct blow to the first chakra. So when a person starts to believe this, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. You see? When a person starts to believe in this and experiences a sense of uncontrollable fear, when you feel you can't be safe, that you are so much in danger in this world that safety is unattainable at that moment, you completely lose touch with reality. People slide into paranoid schizophrenia. Then they say, oh, I'm being attacked through Wi-Fi. Oh, the light bulb on the ceiling is blinking red. And the person says, oh my god, some agencies are irradiating me with red beams on purpose to destroy me. Oh, they're attacking me again through the lamps, through this thing. A car drives by and its headlights shine into the room. But the person thinks they're being attacked. You see? So these are already symptoms of a certain type of disorder which are primarily associated with the destruction of the first chakra. That's why it's incredibly important, first and foremost, to build on a solid foundation. In other words, how our foundation is constructed. Everything else, how all the other chakras are, depends on this. It's impossible to develop clairvoyance. As people have told me, right? Oh, can I just take a class on the third eye chakra? I want to open my clairvoyance. No, that's not possible. Because first of all, energy rises within us from the bottom up. It moves from the lower chakra to the upper one. And if you just focus on opening the third eye, you might open it in such a way that you won't be able to close it again, and you'll go crazy from what you'll see on the subtle plane. And because you won't have support and energetic stability, you'll see how all these entities flying around, you are trying to take a piece of your energy. Do you think you'd want to see something like that? I doubt it. I really doubt it. If you look at chakras from the side, their structure resembles torsion fields. That is, they have front and back aspects of energy. Energy flows out from the front and the back, and there are certain interconnections between each chakra. So the chakras at the front and the chakras at the back each have a front and back aspect. The same chakra extends both to the front and the back, and it has energy channels that go out and connect with other chakras. If we connect all the energy channels into a harmonious structure, the light body is automatically activated. A person achieves a quantum leap, reaching the state that all meditating yogis, all meditating gurus, masters of enlightenment and awakening, the Buddha state, the Christ state, strive for. In other words, it is exactly what many people aspire to. That very quantum leap. Perhaps the best way to understand this and practically build the system is to work specifically with the chakra system. It is now forgotten by many people, don't talk about it, and many simply lack information because, frankly, what is written on the internet is amateurish. I bought these thick books on chakras in English. I thought maybe there's at least something interesting in there. I flipped through, read some parts, and realized that there's nothing in there about the petals or what they're responsible for. In other words, we no longer see any deep information there. We can't get it from those sources anymore. Energy flows move from each chakra to every other chakra. That is, we realized that when I started to study the chakra system, I discovered that it's not enough to simply open the chakras. In fact, everyone has chakras. Everyone's chakras are open and everyone's chakras are functioning. But just like in our body, there is a connection between a finger on the hand and the toe on the foot. Yes, for example, what kind of connection is that? How is a finger on the hand connected to the toes on the foot? Well, through the circulatory system, yes. Through the nervous system. Because in the nervous system, electrical signals travel from the fingertips to the brain, and from the brain they can travel to the tip of another finger, right? Also through the circulatory system, because the blood that reaches the fingertip on the hand, after some time passing through the circulatory loops, will flow through all parts of the body, including the foot. That's why everything in our body moves and circulates. It's exactly the same with the chakras. The very same energy that circulates in the Muladhara also flows into the other chakra. And each chakra is connected to the others. What happens if your arm falls asleep? What happens if your leg falls asleep? Well, you'll probably feel some pretty uncomfortable sensations. And what happens if your chakras get blocked or inactive? Essentially, it's an interesting association, but that's exactly what happens. If you block the flow of energy within yourself, your chakras end up in a state of deficiency, a lack of energy, which leads to one of the chakras becoming disconnected. For example, people often ask me, which chakra is responsible for money? Can I start with that one? No, you can't, because everything needs to happen step by step. The third chakra is responsible for money, but it's not quite correct to say that it is responsible for money. This is the Manipura chakra. But in general, it is responsible for the ability to manage flows of abundance, not just money. So you can't just simplify it and say, this chakra is for money, this one is for sex, this one is for safety, this one is for love. No, they can be divided and simplified. Like each chakra is very complex in its structure. Different aspects of the chakras can be responsible for money. For example, in order to have a flow of abundance, a person needs to love themselves, love life, and love abundance. When a person does not love themselves, does not love life, does not accept themselves, then disharmonious connections are formed between the chakras. Each of these beliefs, I love myself, I value my time, I value my effort, I value my work is nothing other than a connection between the chakras. For example, when energy flows from the heart chakra, from the center responsible for understanding oneself as a loving being, if this energy channel is supposed to connect with the channel of the Muladhara chakra, then we get a channel through which the energy of life circulates. I love life. When we say this phrase, the energy from the heart chakra connects with the energy from the Muladhara chakra. If this connection is missing, then the body starts to hurt, meaning energy is lost. I don't love life. And then on top of that comes, I hate my body. Now, many of you tell me, don't you love your body? You hate it. For example, if I were to say to one of you, you're fat, you're overweight, you're ugly, you're a freak, how does the Earth-given Mother Earth bear to carry you at all? Have you even looked at yourself? Look at yourself, at those dark circles under your eyes. Look at your wrinkles, how ugly and shriveled you are. You a total freak. I wouldn't even want to stand next to you, and you probably have breath that reeks like rot in the morning. Does it feel good to hear things like that? If not, if you feel uncomfortable with what I'm saying, then most likely you have a problem with self-love because you don't understand that there's a difference between what other people say and who you really are. Your body isn't just some piece of meat walking around on two legs that you suffer because of, right? Many people hate their bodies because they get sick, cause them pain, suffering, and unhappiness. And because of this, the energy of the heart chakra becomes disconnected from the energy of the Muladhara and can't nourish the first chakra with the energy of love. I'm old, I'm ugly. And then a person becomes very sensitive, very vulnerable to other people's opinions. God forbid someone says that I'm not good enough. They start watching themselves very closely and try to lose weight, constantly criticizing themselves, going up to the mirror, looking, finding a million flaws, while other people might look and say, you're not that ugly, you look good, you have a nice body. But they dislike themselves so much, they even hate themselves, that a self-destruction program starts to kick in. They age even faster, gain even more weight, diseases start to develop more quickly, and in particularly severe cases cancer. A typical example is when the connection between the heart chakra and the first chakra is disrupted. When this connection is missing, the root cause is often cancer, because this is also reflected in the third chakra where resentment arises. After all, other people are supposed to love me, supposed to praise me, but they don't do that. They don't live up to my expectations. So there's resentment towards other people and inability to accept their opinions, right? And do you truly believe that each and every individual aspect of the chakra simply vanishes and that is the absolute end of it? If a vital energy channel is indeed supposed to be present and functioning, but it becomes severely cut or completely torn off, it is precisely as if we were to take and deliberately sever a major blood vessel. So what happens if you take a vein and cut it? What will happen? Blood will constantly pour out of that vein into the surrounding space. And what happens if one chakra is cut off from another? From a channel that has been cut, energy will constantly fly out. You're preparing questions for me, right? If you want, you can stop me somewhere and also ask something important. If a channel is torn off and energy seeps out into the space from it, what kind of energy? It's tasty, it's very good, something that someone really needs. If you don't need it, if your love doesn't need it, if you don't value your body, if you don't love it, you say, I'm bad, what are you talking about? I can't enjoy life. No. Sex is a sin. Pleasure is a sin. Yes. And in the Christian understanding, any pleasure at all is a terrible sin that can only be cleansed through suffering. If you hold this kind of opinion, then your second chakra, the Svadhisthana, starts to close and become blocked. This is the chakra responsible for energy, pleasure, and enjoyment. And what can, like you're saying about money, what kind of money can there be if there's no pleasure in life? If there's no sense of security and health, what kind of enjoyment of life can there be? Money and material abundance, those are the third stage. The first stage is about safety, comfort, and health. The second stage is experiencing pleasure, enjoyment from life, and harmonizing that pleasure. And the third stage is about managing your own life and the lives of others. The unfolding of abundance that is scaling up your enjoyment. So if you have health and pleasure, then money is the scaling up of health and pleasure in your environment. That's what Manipura and its energy are about. And a lot of it is connected to personal qualities, to a person's character. That's why, for example, when someone is very dependent on other people's opinions, meaning they can't even imagine how to live without others' approval. People have to praise me. Why do you help people? Oh, I just help them, that's all. Why? For what? Just imagine you kept helping someone, helping, and then they tell you, go to hell. So what then? Or they send you off to Josephine Pavlovna. But you were helping so much, you practically devoted your whole life to it. And then what? How would you feel? Ah, they're so ungrateful. Tiska. Resentment, feeling devalued, and all sorts of emotions like that, right? Is that possible? It's possible. Why do we get upset when we help someone, especially when they didn't ask for it, and then feel very disappointed that we're not thanked enough? It's precisely because we're not helping out of genuine love, but rather out of egoism and the sense of pride. Since our Manipura chakra, which is the solar plexus chakra, simply cannot truly love itself. People who are called narcissists, People who are labeled as selfish and self-absorbed, in reality don't love themselves. They're not confident in themselves. They just want to appear confident. They have a broken connection between the heart chakra and the Manipura chakra. They have no idea what love is. They don't know what empathy is. For them, only selfish needs exist, and they see other people solely as objects for self-gratification. I'm sure many of you are now recognizing people in your own circles who behave this way. Now, let me describe a situation to you. Imagine for a moment there's someone truly special in your life who genuinely wants to be good and is always actively helping you, constantly and consistently trying to assist and truly be needed and valued. That is, you might not even need this help. You don't even know how to refuse. They say, "Oh, let me bring this for you. I'll bake you some bread. I'll give you this and that. Oh, I brought you a gift and I'll do this for you and that too." And you kind of accept it, but you already start to feel uncomfortable around this person, as if you already owe them something. And you try to reciprocate so as not to offend them. This person tries so hard to please you, tries so hard to be good, and just try to suddenly not adequately thank someone enough, or not give the same consideration in return, or perhaps say something truly bad and regrettable. The heavy artillery will go into action right away. "I do so much for you. I tell you both. I am everything for you, and you don't help me and you talk about me like that. Ouch. Oh. This is not called love at all. No one loves you. In such relationships, the person is not trying to help you. They are trying to help themselves. They are trying to hook you, and by giving you bait in the form of some gift, something, they want to put you on a leash, on a hook, as someone who owes them. And then, when they need to use you, they'll pull your strings so that as someone who owes them, you respond to any whim or benefit, and they can control and manipulate you. These people are called narcissists, egoists. You will never get any love or understanding from them. It is impossible to change them. It is impossible to get understanding from them. It is pointless to argue with them. Because if you try to tell them that you don't like something, you will automatically be completely demonized as a person, and you will become a terrible enemy about whom only bad things will be said afterwards. If you have people around you who can also behave this way, know that such people have a disrupted connection between the heart chakra and the Manipura. It is very important to restore this connection so that your energy of love does not depend on someone else's opinion, not on what people say, not on how they say it, how you look or how you act, but on who you really are. That is, many people don't even know themselves, don't even feel themselves, and it's very important to establish a connection with yourself. They go through their whole lives creating for themselves. Like that boy I told you about, how did he end up with schizophrenia? Should I tell you? I observed this. To begin with, he has his given name, the one his parents gave him, and which he chose even before being born. I won't mention it, but let me come up with an alternative name. Let's call him Sasha Korshunov or something. Yes, let's go with Sasha Korshunov. So this Sasha Korshunov, born Sasha Korshunov, yes, he was different from everyone else since childhood. And he felt bad. He didn't accept his body. He didn't love it. He thought that everything earthly was bad, that it was all suffering. In other words, he had misconceptions that blocked his first chakra. And as a result, when he started his public activities, he came up with a pseudonym for himself. That is a false identity, something that sounded more pleasant, like say Oreo. So what else? What could you come up with there? Oriol Angelo, for example. Angel Orlovich or something like that, right? So some kind of narcissistic name, right? And of course his higher self seemed to him to be a famous ascended master and all that, almost like Jesus Christ. And when this situation started to truly go on and on, even though he had meticulously created this elaborate persona, he diligently recorded all of his videos for YouTube, but he never actually showed himself, specifically his physical body, because he unfortunately didn't take proper care of his own body at all. He was very thin, looked very unhealthy, because taking care of your body means you have to exercise. You have to watch your diet, you have to do sports. And when you sit in a chair all day, of course your body will become very dystrophic. He looked unhealthy and he didn't want to ruin his image. He was afraid, embarrassed about himself, and didn't show himself. He blocked comments. That is, he disabled comments under his videos so that no one, God forbid, would criticize him. God forbid, what would happen then? And every time it caused him pain. Why? Because when you don't accept yourself, when you don't love yourself, any alternative opinion, you become dependent on it, you become narcissistic, and it hurts you, so you try to block the source as if people are to blame. But it's not the people who say hurtful things to you who are to blame. You shouldn't care at all what anyone says about you. Absolutely not care. You should first and foremost think about how you treat yourself, how you evaluate yourself. Do meditations help open the chakras? Of course. Of course they help. Very much so. Prepare your questions. Because when I say, okay, now it's time to ask questions, you'll be actively writing your questions and we'll be answering them. I'll also talk separately about meditations. And eventually, after a few years had passed, I looked at what he was doing again. He actually turned off all the comments there. In other words, he stopped showing himself anywhere at all. There was just a processed voice, and that was it. And even on various social media platforms, he completely removed his previous pseudonym and instead replaced it with something quite abstract. A new name, but not even a truly real name, just some kind of ambiguous label or identifier. So the denial of personality went so far that even the persona he had invented for himself no longer satisfied him. You understand, right? And so there was a blurring of identity, and this denial of oneself, this fear of criticism, this fear of accepting and loving oneself, led to the person trying to create a false self, a false identity. And this false identity became a source of immersion for him, a way to escape from reality. Many people never had the chance to express themselves since childhood. Just think back to your childhood. What do you want? It doesn't matter what you want. You'll do as your mother says. We know better what you need, not you, right? You'll go where we tell you to. You'll do what I want. When you grow up, then you can think for yourself. And then you grow up and you don't know what you want anymore. You don't know what to think. Because you're no longer your own person. You don't belong to yourself. You're stuck somewhere back at the stage of chakra development. And many people get stuck at the stage of developing the first 2 or 3 chakras, and that's it. They can't move forward. And then when they start meditating, when they begin to practice subtle techniques, it doesn't work effectively because they fall into pride, they fall into vanity. As soon as they come into contact with money, that's it. They lose their minds. As soon as they get a taste of a little fame, they lose their minds completely. I actually had 2 examples of such channelers, and interestingly enough, by coincidence, they even had the same names who went insane. That is, the second one also lost his mind. And what he's saying now, well, it's frightening. You see, this question of chakras always remains relevant. And no matter what level people are at, no matter how many years they've been practicing spiritual disciplines, they shouldn't say, I've been doing this for 50 years, I've spun these chakras 1,000 times. If you had really been diligently working with them and consistently spinning them every single day, and if your practice was truly correct, effective, and deeply ingrained, you would have long ago unlocked such incredible superpowers within yourself that you simply cannot even begin to imagine. There's no need to call me. Even if you had my number, I still wouldn't pick up the phone. Now I'm ready to answer your questions. I have an assistant sitting here off camera, and I'll ask him to read the questions out loud or ask any that he has prepared or any that came up for him during our conversation, during our lecture. What do you think about what I just said?
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to ask a few questions from the chat to clear up any misconceptions or dogmatic views about chakras, so that from here on out, we're all speaking the same language, so to speak. The first question: how can you tell which chakras are dormant and which ones are active and functioning?
You can determine this based on your current needs and requests. Actually, all chakras are functioning. It's like asking, how can I tell if my liver is asleep or working? Your liver, all your organs are working just like all your chakras. But the question is, what condition is your liver in, right? It could be very suppressed or barely hanging on. It's the same with chakras. They all function, but some of them can be very constricted or blocked, like a lake with no outlet. Imagine a lake, a container for energy. For the water in the lake to stay clean, a stream needs to flow in and another needs to flow out. If the water stagnates, the lake becomes swampy. Everything becomes overgrown with duckweed and pond scum. Leeches and all sorts of nasty things appear, everything gets covered in algae, and the water starts to rot and decay. Fish die in it, and so on. The same thing happens with chakras. If you don't circulate energy, it stagnates in them and becomes stale. That's why, when we work with chakras, to determine which chakra is currently weakened, you need to go from the bottom up, meaning you start by checking the first one. If you have health problems, meaning you have physiological difficulties, for example, issues with safety, you are overwhelmed by fears, or you experience irrational fears. For example, fear when you're standing at the edge of a cliff is an appropriate fear. But fear when there is no danger is an inappropriate fear. And in that case, you are truly afraid of something that doesn't exist. For instance, a person says, "Oh, I'm afraid that my children will die from drowning in the sea." But the person lives in Siberia, for example, where there isn't even a sea anywhere nearby. Of course, that's a very strange fear, one that isn't based in reality. Sometimes people have panic attacks, and that's related to this as well. So, if there are health problems, lack of energy, a feeling of not loving or even disliking your body, hatred towards your own body, as well as overeating and excess weight, this may be connected to the first chakra. You could say that there are disharmonious issues in the first chakra. Sometimes the holes that form in our etheric field, like I showed you before entities, can interact with us through these severed energy channels. So if a person doesn't love themselves and doesn't love life, if they say, "I'm spiritual, I'm always floating above it all this material stuff, that's bad. And that you should only be spiritual, just meditate all day long." But that's not true. Sometimes you need to go and clean the toilet. Sometimes you need to pick up a rake and go dig in the dirt. And that's normal. The spiritual people do this too. And that's normal. Sometimes you need to go eat some food, go to the bathroom, have a bowel movement. That's normal. That's also part of life, of spiritual life. That's why it's important not to lose touch with reality and drift off into delusion, but to consciously direct your attention to what is important at the moment. Next question.
So, the next question. Which emotional states most often cause energy leaks? And which types of emotions or thoughts are most destructive to a person's energy field?
In general, emotions and chakras are inextricably linked because emotions are a form of energy manifestation. Emotions are a kind of sensation. I'll explain this in more detail in the chakra course. There, we explain in detail how emotions are formed. So, we have each chakra has its own petals. The petals are specific quantum-based structures. I explain this in detail in the course. And just like the petals of a flower, these petals unfold around the chakra, forming electromagnetic arcs around it. If any of these electromagnetic arcs of the petals is broken, it leads to an unmet need, for example, the need for safety or the need for a sense of comfort. As a direct and significant result, the profound disruption of vital energy flows within the various chakras gives rise to powerful and often challenging emotions that subsequently trigger specific actions and behaviors. For example, if the petals on the first chakra toes responsible for the sense of safety are torn, they begin to vibrate and the emotion of fear arises. The emotion of fear creates a certain intention, namely the intention to return oneself to a state of safety. So, what does fear push us toward? Toward regaining a sense of safety. No emotion is inherently good or bad. Every emotion has its own direction, its own vector. What is it needed for? For example, if fear arises, it doesn't mean it's something bad. Everyone feels fear. Everyone has fear. Those who say, I have no fear, I've worked through everything, well, you're just lying to yourself. Everyone has fear. And when it arises, it does so in order to restore the sense of safety. But if you restore the sense of safety, let's say, for example, you're really standing at the edge of a cliff and fear arises. Step back, you step back, that's it. The sense of safety returns. The Muladhara petal becomes harmonized. If this doesn't happen, then the fear starts to become fixed, so to speak. That is, when fears are inappropriate, relating to situations that are not under your control. In other words, a person is afraid of germs, afraid of all sorts of things that they simply can't control. Afraid that a star might fall on their head, right? Even though there don't seem to be any real cases of that happening, they're still afraid, right? And that's when pathological distortions really do arise in the chakra, and perhaps that's where the root cause lies. And then fear starts to destroy because it becomes fixated on itself and begins to wrap itself around the chakra to fear itself. And that's when it turns into a block. There are also feelings like shame, which blocks the Svadhisthana chakra. The feeling of guilt, which blocks the Manipura chakra, right? They can affect both the Manipura and the Svadhisthana. The feeling of sadness and sorrow, which block the heart chakra. But these feelings themselves are not bad. They also carry some kind of need for certain changes. But if we don't understand what those changes are for, then they just get stuck. If you try to suppress shame, suppress sadness, suppress fear, suppress anger, suppress aggression, they go deep into the chakras and block the energy flows. For example, let's say you feel a surge of aggression and you think, no, I can't. Be quiet, that's it. Be quiet. Shut up. Don't say anything. You can't. These are family, loved ones. We can't say anything against them, right? That's it. You have to stay silent. So a person suppresses. From childhood, for example, some resentment, anger, aggression toward their parents. They can't defend themselves. Your personal boundaries are constantly being violated there. Then the energy flow of the corresponding chakra gets blocked, and along with it, material abundance is also blocked. And nothing works out in relationships, nothing gets built, there's no money, the family is struggling, and health suffers too. And then all sorts of psychosomatic issues will start, various allergies, all kinds of problems, fibroids, uterine issues, cysts, and all sorts of situations caused specifically by the blockage of energy flows. When we clearly and thoroughly understand how the entire energy system is structured and organized, we can then draw a very clear and precise connection to what each individual energy channel truly means and represents. And even if a person isn't clairvoyant, you can simply conduct an interview, ask the person how they're feeling, and then on the chakra map, which we'll be drawing at the end of the course, you can mark for yourself which channels are disrupted. And there you already have instructions on how to restore that connection. You just do want to restore the connection and the person's life magically changes, everything falls into place. And there's no need to spend years going to a psychologist or working through things in a complicated way for a long time. There are simpler ways. If you can see the system as a whole in its entirety. Any more questions?
All right, the next question from the chat. If you just live in positive emotions and in harmony, in love with yourself, will the chakras work steadily on their own without meditation or special exercises?
Actually, chakras work anyway, even without meditation or special exercises. The only question is whether we are aware of the processes happening within them. If you live only in positive emotions, that's a completely unrealistic situation because, first of all, there are no positive or negative emotions. They aren't divided into positive and negative. All emotions are necessary, and each emotion has its own meaning. It's impossible to always be in only positive emotions. People who are always in positive emotions end up in a mental hospital. They don't have negative emotions. They're always in a state of euphoria. That's already schizophrenia, all sorts of paranoid states. That doesn't concern you, and you shouldn't strive for that. For any normal person, it's natural to sometimes feel anger, sometimes feel fear, and sometimes experience other emotions. But most importantly, not to be a slave to them, but to be aware of their root cause and to control it. The root cause itself, not the emotion, but the source from which it arises. Don't just try to suppress it. to crush this emotion inside yourself, to push it deeper so that it's not seen or heard, but rather let it go, release it, and work with that energy. Next.
Another question on emotions. How can you express them harmoniously for yourself and others, without suppressing or accumulating them?
This is a very broad topic. You could make an entire separate video about it. But in general, I would say that to start with, you need to be aware of your emotions. The initial surge of emotion can always be very impulsive. And yes, of course, you can say you shouldn't suppress your emotions. It's very easy to say, right? If you feel anger and want to swear, well, what can I say? Go ahead and swear, go ahead and curse. But first and foremost, it's also important to look inward, to step back for a moment and ask yourself, what is prompting me to feel this emotion? I had an incredible realization about the nature of emotions, that each emotion corresponds to a certain feeling that lies at the core deep within the chakras. For example, the emotion of anger that people experience, it boils down to a feeling of helplessness. That is, anger arises at the level of the Manipura chakra. When the Manipura, what is the function of the Manipura? It's about managing the situation. When a situation gets out of control, anger arises. Anger is an emotion that is needed to restore control. But if we just mindlessly get angry, right, that won't actually restore control. Not every method that's the easiest to carry out actually helps us achieve harmony in a particular chakra. I mean, you could go crazy and throw your computer at the wall. I actually saw this happen once in my life, when right before my eyes, my friend punched straight through a computer monitor with his fist. Then he picked up the computer and said to me, "Step aside." And then, whoosh bam! He slammed it into the wall so hard that it left a hole. And after that, he spent about 10 more minutes jumping on the remains of that computer with his feet. Well, sorry, but that's not what emotional release is. It's the process of self-awareness, of understanding the root cause of the emotion. What is that? A feeling of helplessness? Why did he smash the computer? Because the computer froze up. In other words, I can't control it, I'm helpless. But we don't want to admit our helplessness. So we get angry at ourselves or at others. And that's where a lot of secrets lie. So you need to be able to recognize your emotions. In this course, we will definitely be working with emotions. First and foremost, because many emotions can actually block chakras if they are not recognized. It's like, like silt that settles if there is no flow of energy. If there is no cleansing, then even things that seem beneficial can accumulate, get clogged, and the energy doesn't flow properly. Go ahead, ask your question.
Why do some illnesses occur even in people who lead a conscious lifestyle and work on themselves energetically? What could this indicate?
Look, we don't actually know if they really work with energy or if they are truly conscious, because that's just what they call themselves. But whether they are actually conscious, that's a big question. If a person were truly conscious, they would surely understand the reasons behind their illnesses. However, it is important to understand that illnesses do not always arise as a direct consequence or result of some inherently negative process, nor should they be seen as a form of divine punishment for perceived sins or transgressions. Because sometimes these painful situations occur for the sake of development and growth. Sometimes the soul itself chooses this, attracting illnesses into its life, so that by overcoming them a person can do some deep inner work and evolve even further. In other words, as they say, love your illness. Sometimes, if it weren't for certain illnesses that come into our lives, we wouldn't even think about engaging in self-development at all. Have you ever experienced that? But surely many of you were led to self-development by not so great circumstances. Because people whose lives are too good and perfect, well, as a rule, they don't really bother much about things like spirituality, chakras, or energies.
So, the next question. What should you do when you don't get any pleasure from your own life? Everything is falling apart. You have no energy, nothing brings you joy, and you have no desire to do anything.
And that's exactly our specific case here. So welcome to this comprehensive course on Global Chakra Awakening. The very simplest and most straightforward thing you can do right now is just sign up and begin your journey. From there, we'll walk through everything together. But seriously, what should you do if that's your situation? If you're experiencing this feeling, it means your energy field is completely depleted. Most likely, it's full of holes and being drained by parasitic entities. And no, you don't need to run to a fortune teller or an exorcist or try to cleanse yourself. That won't help anyway. You need to work on the root cause. So if your energy channels are torn from a chakra and energy is leaking out, entities can attach themselves to that torn energy channel and prevent you from breaking free. But removing the entity itself won't accomplish anything. It will literally come back to the same place within a day. So you really don't need to worry too much about that. What's more important is to identify where the channel is torn. You need to stitch it back together. So when you understand how the energy system is structured, you start to restore the connections between the chakras, and your life begins to recover, its harmony is restored. For example, if you have absolutely no energy and genuinely don't feel like doing anything at all, of course, all the higher chakras will effectively be at zero, and you will need to work diligently with the foundational first chakra. So, to begin with, you need to understand what throws you off balance, what makes you feel out of place and unsafe. If you've had the opportunity to read Castaneda's profound and insightful books, I, myself, have only had the chance to read one of them so far in that particular book. The very first and quite significant task that the wise shaman imparted to Castaneda was indeed a remarkably interesting one. Find your true place in the world. A simple task. He had to figure out what that meant. So he walked and walked and walked and walked. He didn't know what it meant to find his place. And when he finally gave up, he still didn't know what it was. He just wanted to leave. He simply just wanted to sit down somewhere and stay there, to meditate there. He sat down where he felt comfortable and began to meditate. And then the shaman came up to him and said, "Well done, you found your place. You completed the first task." It's exactly the same here. The first chakra is about the feeling of comfort and safety. You need to find your place in this world. That is, where do you feel comfortable and safe? What does comfort mean to you? What does safety mean to you? Maybe you need to leave a toxic relationship, a toxic family, move away, or go somewhere else. So it depends on you. And then everything else follows.
So, the next question. What happens in a person's body and mind during an energy leak? What kinds of these leaks are there? And how can you protect yourself from them?
Energy leaks come in different forms depending on their direction. If a person directs their energy themselves, for example, "Oh, right, you absolutely have to give up meat." Of course, yeah, just a second. Nonsense. I've been through this myself. How many years of vegetarianism do I have behind me? Well, almost 10 years of being a vegetarian. I'll tell you about that separately. As for the sources of energy leaks, well, of course, a person can consciously give their energy of intention to egregores. But besides egregores, there is also the essential nature of energy leaks. This happens when a person rejects their own energy. That is, for example, if you don't need your own energy of love, you don't love yourself, you don't respect yourself, you don't value yourself, you deny yourself pleasure in life, then those energy channels that are responsible for pleasure, for love, for self-respect, for interacting and communicating with yourself, for understanding yourself, for being aware of your feelings, yes, the connection between the third eye and the awareness of your sensations. If these connections are disrupted, then the energy channels stick out in different directions, and entities can come and attach themselves to them. Through what? The attachment of entities happens through destructive thoughts and beliefs, for example, through fears, through low vibrational feelings. In other words, no entities can ever attack a person if they have inner peace, harmony, and balance, because there is simply nothing for them to latch onto. Only when a person has fears inside themselves, when they have their own internal blocks, only then can entities latch onto these states as if swinging them inside you like a pendulum. But they are not the root cause of these states. They do not bring them into you. They only feed off this energy. So if you are a toxic person, if you like to say nasty things, make cutting remarks, judge others, criticize everyone, hate, then this energy of your hatred, shame, anger resentment, sadness, which you generate within yourself and go around grumbling to the whole world. Oh, everyone is this and that, like this and like that. Oh my. If only they were like this and not like that. And so what happens then? You generate for yourself an energy that is of a low vibrational order, a kind of spiritual crude oil thick and low vibrational. If your energy channels are disconnected, then who feeds on this crude oil? Those entities for whom this is tasty. So how do you eliminate this root cause? Do you need to go get cleansed by some exorcists? No. You don't need to go to any old women, fortune tellers, exorcists, or witches to get cleansed. First and foremost, you need to take care of your own head. Restore your consciousness. When there are problems in your head, your mind goes in the wrong direction. You need to make sure it starts going in the right direction. You need to take a magic hammer, give your head a tap, and start thinking. Turn on your awareness so that your attention belongs to you. Shift your focus to your own feelings and emotions, restore your connection with yourself, and re-establish harmony among all your chakras so there are no conflicts between them. One time I was teaching a chemistry lesson and I distinctly noticed that the young girl I was tutoring seemed to be in a particularly bad mood. It was quite evident. I could sense from her energy that she wasn't feeling very well. I said, "Do you want me to check your chakras? Let's do it after the lesson." She said, "Oh, I'm really interested in that. Yes, please check them." So I start checking her chakras. Back then, I would actually draw the chakras on a tablet. I'm drawing and observing. I say, between your heart chakra and your Vishuddha chakra, one responsible for communication, understanding, and the heart there's a block. There's some kind of conflict between them. It's as if something happened recently that's causing you pain. She says, "I had a big fight with my parents." And that's exactly what it is. I want to speak, but I can't. Some people have this sensation of a lump in their throat, like someone is choking them, and so they do meditations. I've experienced this myself. I used to meditate, I tried to open the central channel, but the more I tried to open it, the more I felt like my neck was being squeezed, just like that. And this sensation was specifically connected to the Vishuddha chakra because it is responsible for allowing yourself to be and for self-recognition. That is self-recognition, self-respect, allowing yourself to exist and the ability to release emotions and feelings. In other words, when emotions and feelings can be expressed, but many people don't understand emotions and can't express their feelings. For example, a person gets irritated, gets angry. You ask them, "What are you feeling right now?" And they say, "Everything annoys me." But what kind of feeling is that? I don't like it when they say that. And what kind of feeling is that? Who doesn't like it? You don't like it? And why don't you like it? In other words, what is this emotion? And until you dig down and realize that at the core there is actually the emotion of anger, and in reality a feeling of helplessness, and ultimately the belief that other people determine your life, until you get to that point, the root cause isn't revealed and the block doesn't dissolve. That's why it's very important to work with these states in a comprehensive way. Next question.
Next question from the chat. Why is Kundalini moved up and down? And what is this energy? How is it connected to the chakras? And can entities connect through Kundalini?
It's incorrect to say that entities connect through Kundalini. It's not some kind of separate energy. Kundalini is like electric current. For example, if you've assembled a computer, right? When you press the power button, the electric current starts to flow. But the electric current can be weak, or it can be powerful and strong. And Kundalini is also a kind of electric current. But it might not start working until everything in our body is properly aligned. In other words, it's dangerous and unhealthy to try to activate Kundalini if your chakras aren't aligned. Because it's like connecting a device with crossed wires, burnt out wiring, or broken connections to high voltage. There will be even more short circuits, which will lead to something burning out somewhere. I have seen people whose chakras have burned out completely, whose connections between chakras have burned out as well. And unfortunately, this is very dangerous. It can lead to a mental institution at best, or even to death. That's why you should only work with Kundalini at the very last stage of chakra practice, when all the chakras are already harmonized and the connections between them are established. You might ask me, Do I raise Kundalini? No, I don't do that. When you open your chakras naturally by yourself, Kundalini rises on its own. You don't need to force it. It's not some kind of dog that you need to chase with a stick. It activates on its own, flows on its own, and moves on its own when the gates in the form of chakras are opened before it.
What happens when the chakras enter into overall resonance and begin to work as a single system?
The activation of Kundalini and the awakening of consciousness occur. This is when a person connects with their divine self, their higher self, with the aspect of Atman and the Absolute. And at that point, they become not just a human, but a superhuman. And depending on which chakras were dominant in that person, they may even develop superhuman abilities.
A very frequently asked question in the chat is, how can I tell if I have entities? If I do, how can I get rid of them?
Look, it's not that you have entities or that you belong to them. It's more like just a background presence in the space. Basically, almost every person interacts with the subtle plane on a daily basis, and we can't avoid that. We interact with them anyway. There's no need to be afraid of this. It's like asking, oh my God, tell me, do I have microbes in my mouth? Yes, of course you do. Do I have microbes on my skin? Yes, of course you do. So what should we do about it? Should we go wash our mouths with alcohol and scrub them with a brush until they bleed? It's simply a matter of regular work and working with vibrations. That is, entities of the subtle plane do not operate according to their own will. In the subtle plane, everything is based on vibrations, on resonance and frequencies. Whatever frequency your personal field resonates at, that's precisely what will naturally revolve around you. If you resonate at the frequencies of pure love and profound well-being, then truly angelic entities, high vibrational beings of the subtle plane, benevolent, kind, and deeply compassionate, will undoubtedly revolve around you. But if you like to criticize yourself, if you enjoy mocking yourself, engaging in self-flagellation, or criticizing other people, then indeed this energy starts to accumulate in your body, and you attract exactly those entities that correspond to this plane. It's similar to density, to a level of density. That is, if we look, for example, in the ocean, there are different levels of density where the water is more or less dense. And if you throw, say, some object that sinks into it, it might not reach the bottom. So, for example, if you take a solid, heavy piece of wood that sinks and put it right on the surface, it will sink to a certain level and stay there. For instance, you can do an experiment like this. Take oil and water, mix them, and then drop different objects into the oil and water like plastic, metal, or other pieces of wood. And you'll notice that some objects stay on the surface of the oil, some sink and remain between the oil and the water, and some sink to the bottom. So the level at which you are depends on your vibrations, on your level of density. Therefore, the best way to protect yourself from any entities is to raise your vibrations. Be aware of your thoughts. Work on increasing your level of density, so that you address not the consequence, but the root cause. Let go of the idea of entities. It's that simple and easy. And direct your attention first and foremost to working with your initial sensations.
I have a good question to add to the previous one. Many people hear about high vibrations, but don't understand what that actually means in practice. What happens to a person when they truly start living at these frequencies or vibrations?
A state occurs where you are in control of yourself. In other words, when there is a surrounding field that vibrates chaotically, but you have your own field where you choose how to vibrate, and you consciously choose how you want to vibrate. And then your vibrations go beyond the boundaries of this universe, and you can vibrate at levels that are even beyond comprehension. It's not just joy, the feeling of happiness or pleasure, it's a sense of permanent love and the dissolution of the main illusion, the illusion of separation, the illusion that there is a difference between you and other people. In other words, a vibrational merging with the universe takes place. You realize that it's not you who is vibrating, but the universe that is vibrating, and you are simply aligning yourself within this vibration, within its flow. This is the very process of expanding consciousness and raising vibrations.
Mm-hmm. Next question from the chat. How exactly does energy move from chakra to chakra?
In different ways. It can move directly through the central channel, through the Sushumna. Sushumna Nadi is the central channel that runs along the spine. Or it can move along the outer edge, passing from one chakra to another. So, for example, if you look from the side, the energy spirals out of one chakra and enters the vortex of another chakra, exits the vortex of that chakra, for instance, circles around the body, and from the back enters the vortex of another chakra. In other words, there are as many channels as there are possible variations. In total, they count 72 or 73,000 channels. However, I truly believe that there isn't a specific fixed number, because in some particular places there may be significantly more channels available, while in others there might be considerably fewer.
Alright, next question. If a particular organ has been removed, how does that affect our chakra or the chakra system as a whole?
By and large, this doesn't mean that the chakra has been removed from you. That is, chakras are of course connected to organs, but only indirectly. Chakras are primarily connected to spiritual states, to bioplasma, which is activated in our body by hormones. For example, chakras are very closely interconnected with the nervous and humoral regulation. If we work with chakras, they automatically and very quickly influence the hormonal system. If a certain chakra, if a certain organ is removed, then the chakra corresponding to that energy may be weakened, it may have a deficiency. But that doesn't mean we can't fully compensate for it. Therefore, here, if the work is energetic, you can fully compensate for this deficiency.
Next question from the chat. How do you work with accumulated sexual energy? Is it possible to direct it towards specific creative processes? What practices can you recommend?
Here, I'd like to ask a counter question. What do you mean by accumulated sexual energy? How does it manifest itself? Maybe if sexual energy is accumulating, it's time to express it in the proper way for its intended purpose. So why doesn't this idea come to your mind? It means you think you have some limitations in expressing this energy somehow. Why do you feel you absolutely have to express it in some other way? So do you perhaps have some negative prejudices about this process? Maybe you have a negative attitude towards it in some way? You know, there is nothing bad or unspiritual about your body. Every single person goes to the bathroom. Can you truly imagine that? Even revered figures like Buddha and Krishna did it too. And there is absolutely nothing spiritual or bad about it, nothing divine either. There is nothing in your body that isn't divine. And that includes sexual energy, it is also divine. Sexual expression is also divine. Your body is divine. Completely. Everywhere. In all place 7 under your arms. It is divine. Where hair grows and sweat comes out. Even in the perineum it is divine. Everywhere. There are no dirty parts of your body. There are no negative parts of your body. Everything is part of a single whole.
Next question. Why do many people feel drained even after resting or meditating? For example, some people lose energy even when they're alone, while others recharge in noisy places. Could this somehow be related to chakras or how they function?
It is absolutely true that this is connected to the chakras and how they function. It depends on how they are tuned. For example, if a person is at home and still feels drained, if their energy is dropping, it might actually mean they've been sitting around for too long. And they may be misunderstanding what it means to rest. In other words, we don't rest by being inactive, except when we're sleeping. Even in our sleep, our etheric matrix is actively working because it is sent to travel to other worlds. That's what we perceive as dreaming. But our energy is generated becomes greater when we take action. In other words, any kind of energy increases through action. People who go to public places, what are they doing? They are active, they don't worry about it. And yes, many so-called spiritual people, spiritual in quotes, often say with a certain disdain, oh, I absolutely do not go to public places because there are simply so many negative people there, so many undesirable entities. Ew, 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 ew. They are truly low vibrational individuals. They consume meat, drink alcoholic beverages, use profanity, and smoke tobacco products. You shouldn't care about that. If you are a high vibrational person, you won't experience any negative effects from this because you set the vibration, you send out the field, and you can be in such places right next to such people and still enjoy yourself. It doesn't matter where you are, even in the subway, where there are crowds of people. You don't need to be afraid that some entities will latch onto you from them or that you'll pick something up there. You can only pick something up because of your fears, only because of negative beliefs, and you don't even have to leave your apartment. But if you're afraid to go somewhere because of these beliefs that the people around you are dirty, negative, bad, or evil, then that's exactly what will happen.
The next question that comes to mind is, what is true inner strength from an energetic point of view? Is it a flow, some kind of special state, or what is it?
True inner strength is the power of being in contact with yourself, with your soul, with your spirit. When a person is in contact with themselves, they realize that there is no greater value in this world than being in contact with oneself. Believe me, this is the meaning of life, right? To find yourself, that's it. There is no other meaning. The most important and necessary thing you need to do in this life, the thing that will make you happy, is not earning a million, not getting a car, an apartment, or perfect relationships. The most important and necessary thing is to find yourself, to get to know yourself. Who are you? Why did you come here? What are you doing here on earth? And then automatically everything else falls into place. You begin to harmonize with yourself. You realize that your life doesn't depend on other people's opinions. It doesn't depend on how your actions might be judged by society. You simply decide for yourself how you want to live. You choose for yourself how you want to exist. You don't need to look around searching for those who approve of and love you, because you become aware of yourself and start to love yourself. This is what it means to rely on yourself.
Based on this, we can understand that the environment responds to a person's inner state. And can you give some practical examples of how this can be managed?
The environment literally mirrors your inner state back to you. So if you feel loved inside, the environment will reflect that back to you like a mirror. You will encounter people who value and love you more. If you feel unloved inside, the environment will send you exactly the same thing. You will meet people who will confirm your fears. This is the mirror principle and the principle of reality control.
Yes. With the transition, what exactly changes in our chakras?
They change the disclosure of additional parameters. That is, it is very important to understand here that each chakra has layers, energy layers as energy levels. That is, there are petals of the first row, there are petals of the second row. It's like the energy layers in an atom. The first layer of the atom, the first energy level, the second layer, the third, the fourth. And our chakras, in essence, are similar to atoms and are structured in the same way. Everything in them is arranged just like in the atoms of the periodic table. And so when the energy of the quantum transition arrives, what happens? They initiate the deeper structures within the chakras, that is, the so-called sub-levels. Each chakra has its own levels, yes, energetic ones. And besides these levels, there are also sub-levels. As a chemist, I can show you this right now using the periodic table as an example. Now, where is it? Here is the Mendeleev periodic table. Look, it has periods. These are the vertical rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on up to 7. And the rows are the horizontal lines. These are the main and secondary groups. They are marked with Roman numerals. Now, let me make it smaller for you. So, what's truly interesting to note is that the Mendeleev table actually has, on this particular side right here, there are 7 periods, and this essentially corresponds to our chakras. That is, the 8th one here is highlighted very conditionally. Those are additional ones placed over there. And separately, you see at the bottom, the lanthanides and actinides are set apart, simply because they don't fit. These are sub-levels. Each level corresponds to a specific chakra. So for example, if we take hydrogen and the first elements of life is, where does life begin? It's hydrogen and helium, the first elements that produce energy in stars. Their combination gives us energy. This is the foundation of the energy of life, the chakra, the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end. And this foundation of life sets the flow of energy in motion within us. It has two aspects, two petals. Next comes the second level of energy. There, chakras are already present, and elements like carbon and oxygen begin to manifest. And so carbon, oxygen, and hydrogenses are already the foundation of life. This is the first chakra. You understand, right? And so it's quite an amazing discovery that I managed to make. The number of petals correlates with the number of levels and the number of periods. Take a look here. These rows are groups. There are 8 groups in total. In the 8th group are the elements with a complete energy level. Take a look. Helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, radon, and others. Why are they in the 8th group? Now, don't look at what's shown in blue, just focus on what's in yellow and helium in pink, okay? S and P elements. Why are they in the 8th group? According to chemistry and according to quantum laws, there is a statement that no more than 8 electrons can be present in the outermost energy level of an atom. And all atoms, all of chemistry is based on the fact that chemical elements strive to achieve the completion of this level, meaning to have 8 electrons in their energy level. Look, just a minute of chemistry now, and you'll understand a lot about chakras. We have 7 groups, or rather 8 groups, yes, 8. Starting from the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Depending on which group the element is in, we can tell how many electrons it has in its outermost level. So for example, carbon-carbon is in this group. You see it's in the 4th group from the first. That means it has 4 electrons in its outer shell. Oxygen is also in the 4th group. So it also has it's in the 6th group. So it has 6 electrons in its outer shell. But ideally, it would be 8. So all of chemistry is fundamentally based upon the profound fact, and in essence, the entire world, all forms of energies are also profoundly based upon the undeniable fact that all chemical elements inherently strive to become precisely like these very stable and unreactive noble gases, which are consistently found in the 8th group of the periodic table. Why are they called noble gases? Because they're like meditating monks. Noble gases are called noble because they don't care about anything. They are complete, their energy level is full, and they've reached a state of Zen. So they just sit there in the 8th group and say, we don't care about anything. I'm neon, I don't care, I don't react with anything. That's it, I've ascended. So these elements, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, practically don't participate in any reactions. Even under the harshest conditions, it's impossible to stir them up, because they've achieved perfection. That is, they've reached completion on 8 levels. It's like having 8 chakras. They've activated all 8 chakras and become enlightened. Other elements, on the other hand, live in karmic cycles of chemical interactions. Take a look at this interesting periodic table. So if we look at carbon actually, let's not take carbon, let's take lithium or sodium for example. Here, sodium 3rd period, 1st group sodium. Sodium is a metal. What are metals? How many electrons does it have in its outer shell? 1, right? And it really wants to have 8 as well. It has 1 electron in its outer shell and 8 in the previous shell. The previous shell is complete. But there's only 1 in the outer shell, so it's kind of stuck, neither here nor there. And that's why sodium thinks, who can I give this electron to? Get rid of it. And then there's chlorine, which already has 7 electrons, but is missing 1. And chlorine thinks, who can I steal an electron from? So if they meet, chlorine will steal an electron from sodium, leaving sodium with 1 less electron and chlorine with 1 more. As a result, they end up with positive and negative charged opposite polarities. And instead of separate elements, we get table salt sodium chloride. A chemical reaction has occurred, and now they have a karmic relationship. You know how they say it, right? When sodium and chlorine become codependent and can't part ways, because sodium gives its electron to chlorine, and chlorine can't do without that electron. Chlorine also wants to be complete, so that it has a total of 8 electrons. And sodium also seems to be comfortable without that one electron. And it turns out that all of chemistry is born from the need to become complete. It's the same with us. We, as people, meet each other and find partners in relationships, sometimes following this same chemical principle. That is, we lack energy in our chakras, and we think the only way to get it is from other people. Some people, like those who are just a little short, are ready to forcibly knock an electron out of someone else, to take it away. Others, who are weaker and whose electrons are not held tightly, want to get rid of them, to shed responsibility. And then they can't live without each other, they stick together. You see? And so people create these karmic connections for themselves. Why? Because that's how everything is arranged in their chakras. And our chakras are directly connected to the periodic table, because here I could actually give you a whole chemistry lesson. There are also these blue elements, you see? They're marked in blue. And these are subgroups, sublevels. So when our outer levels are filled, our sublevels start to fill up, and they don't fill up in order. For example, the 4th level fills up first, right? And then the 3rd, deeper sublevel. It's exactly the same with chakras. If you understand this, then you know that first we open the heart chakra, the chakra of love, and then we need to connect the first level of the heart with the Manipura. So when the first level of the heart chakra is open, only then can you work with the previous level of the Manipura. In other words, the first layer of the Manipura opens, then the first layer of the Anahata, and then the second layer of the Manipura. Not in order. Then the second layer of the Anahata opens, then the first layer of the Vishuddha opens, and after that the third layer of the Anahata. It's not immediately on to the Vishuddha. If you grasp this principle, so when I discovered that this interconnection exists, it was literally like how the periodic table of elements is structured. There are also things like the filling of electron orbitals by energy levels, and principles such as the Pauli exclusion principle, whose rules are quantum principles, like the electron drop, right? We simply cannot just place an electron in an atom on some arbitrary outer energy level. Just stick it there, it will inevitably keep dropping down, moving through various orbitals, until it ultimately occupies the closest available orbital to the nucleus. This fundamental principle is exactly the same with you, in your own life and development. You attract energy. I want, Lord, send me the energy of love. And the energy drops down to the level of the first chakra. Because you have a gap there, you're missing one electron, you're lacking activation. And that's why you always have the electron dropping to that level. A collapse of the energetiku, the energy lattice. That's why you need to go from the bottom up. You can't just start from the 3rd energy level, everything will still drop down to the first. You need to start from the first, build the foundation. First chakra, 2nd chakra, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on. And each time also in the correct sequence. That's why we go through the 7 main chakras, then add additional ones, such as chakras like. Let me show you now. So there are the main chakras, yes, 7 main chakras, and there are those that we have discovered as additional ones. For example, the Abhishna chakra, which is located between the Anahata chakra, heart chakra, and the Manipura. The Abhishna chakra is light green in color. This is in fact one of those deep sublevels that usually goes unnoticed, but is very important, because until it is filled, the activation of the Paramatma Chakrate connection with the higher self will not occur. And if the Paramatma Chakrate connection with the higher self is not activated, a person will have a very hard time hearing themselves. He will have a very hard time hearing his soul, he will even make mistakes, he will lie to himself. So, what is Vishuddha? It's lying. First and foremost, lying to yourself. If you lie to yourself, if you don't know yourself, if you're not honest with yourself, your Vishuddha chakra is blocked. All of this is structured according to the principles of energy levels. So this and that, they are interconnected. And even when I was meditating once, the Pleiadians came to me and showed me the anti-periodic table of Mendeleev, meaning one that consists of energies. And essentially, when energetic flows are created on the subtle plane, they are composed of etheric atoms, that is, from the periodic table of Mendeleev, which they showed me as if in a mirror. The periodic table of Mendeleev was reflected upward through a mirror, like this. And this etheric periodic table of Mendeleev, in essence, also reflects what chakras are made of. That is, they are composed of primary elements, of primary energy, similar to how the atoms of chemical elements are structured. And the same laws work here as well. Just to understand this, I had to study to become a chemist. A whole 6 years, so that later I could connect distinct chakras and chemistry, and I began to understand what this quantum aspect consists of. Any questions?
Many people like the analogy between chemistry and chakra. They say they're ready to listen to this kind of chemistry and even sign up for a course. Alright, next question. Can entities and attachments send us thoughts that aren't ours, or somehow try to manipulate our consciousness in other ways?
They can. Entities and attachments can send thoughts to a person. Do you know how this works? It doesn't happen on its own. This means that the person has already been emitting thoughts on that frequency. They have already attracted, for example, this attachment themselves, let's say alcoholism. So a person starts drinking actually. Let me use smoking as an example. I'm a non-smoker and have always been against smoking. But there were a couple of times back in my student years when I tried it under certain circumstances with my girlfriend. She smoked. And I asked her, let me try. That's it. So it seemed like I tried it just once, and I wasn't thinking about cigarettes or anything at all. It was just to keep her company, out of curiosity. Then I tried it a second time, and then a third. And at some point, I caught myself thinking as I was walking past a cigarette kiosk, maybe I should buy myself a pack of cigarettes. And at that moment, I realized there wouldn't be a next time. I decided there wouldn't be a next time because I realized in time that I had formed a connection with the egregor of smoking, and I had already started to feel the energetic link at first. You build it yourself, you send your energy there, but once the connection is established, it can't be a one-way process. That is, if you send something out, something from there will definitely come back to you, roughly at the same frequency. That's why when you don't practice self-cleansing or regulating the flow of your energy channels, and you work, for example, only with the physical aspect, just physically forbidding yourself something, not allowing yourself, without understanding the root cause and the energetic connection that might remain tugs at you like a string sending these thoughts. They don't obligate you to agree at all. In other words, control is still in your hands. But this thought can come from outside. Here, the only question is your personal control over your energy level. Not like, I'm a victim, I'm being tempted, they're putting ideas in my head. Yes, this is what's cultivated in Christianity, that, oh, he was led astray by a demon. Demons tempted him. Demons, made him commit a sin. That's all not true. Forget it. This influence exists, it does happen, but it's so minor that you can overcome it with just the tiniest bit of your intention. If you have even a little bit of awareness, you'll easily handle it. The main thing is simply to be aware and not be afraid of anything.
Alright. So, how can we learn to recognize such intrusions into our consciousness?
You can't. There's no need to learn to recognize that at all. What you need to learn is to recognize your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own emotions, and don't try to shift the responsibility onto entities, you see. What are you doing right now? You're trying to shift responsibility for your life onto some entities that supposedly attack you, supposedly impose things on you, supposedly try to control you. There's no need for that at all. There's no need to distinguish or identify them in any way. You should just forget about them entirely and first and foremost focus on the root cause. That is, how you yourself think, how you yourself attract these states into your life without shifting responsibility. The responsibility lies solely with you. The way you manage things is the way your life will be managed. Any questions you may have?
So, a question from the chat. Do willpower manifestos help cleanse our field and chakras?
If it didn't help, well, I probably wouldn't have posted it on my YouTube channel. Next question.
What does it mean to awaken the multidimensional self in practice? Are there any first steps that can be taken right now?
In fact, it isn't really asleep. It's only your attention that's asleep, which doesn't want to perceive your multidimensional self. Of course, you can take the first steps in practice. Just meditate, that's all. Every day, try to understand yourself. Who am I? What am I? That's it. That's one answer. Of course, these are just the first steps, but if you want to go really deep, that's a lifelong, profound journey. You should start with the chakras. Come to my course, start with the first chakra, you'll try it, and then decide if you want to continue or not. We're not making you buy the whole course right away.
Alright, is it possible to learn to feel where our true desires are and where the imposed ones are not by the mind, but by the body or intuition?
No, no need. So here we approach the question differently. You don't need to feel out which desires are imposed and which are truly yours. Why? Because in reality, all of them are yours. There's no such thing as something being imposed. If you want something, it means you are the one who wants it. How did this play out for me? There was a period in my life when I became deeply immersed in Christianity. And at that time, it seemed to me that I had become possessed, that demons had entered me, that I was being controlled, that these demons were constantly instilling sinful thoughts in me, trying to make me commit sins. Yes. And at some point, this situation really infuriated me, and I was struck by the absurdity of it all. I mean, wait, what kind of nonsense is this? I pray to God and ask Him to help me. But for some reason, I somehow can't communicate with angels. But entities and demons, on the other hand, seem to be in my head, instilling negative thoughts and tempting me to commit sins. Something about this doesn't add up. And then I realized that, in fact, what I needed to do was what I need to do is simply admit that it's not entities controlling me, it's not them tempting me to sin. It's just that I want it myself. You see, the highest rate of schizophrenia is among religious people. Why? Because religious people they split themselves into entities, they deny their own desires, shift responsibility from themselves onto mythical demons and entities, and blame them for tempting them. But they themselves are so holy. And here they are being tempted. Oh dear. Oh my. And instead of realizing that it's actually you who wants it, not your so-called entities, the fool starts messing around, trying to get rid of these entities, fighting them, and in doing so only makes the rift between soul and mind, between himself, even worse. Because external entities are not really capable of having any significant influence on a person, since inside us there is our own internal zoo of subpersonalities. These are our shadow selves, which are actually you. It's just that sometimes you confuse entities with your shadow self. We hardly ever feel the presence of entities. It's like, a bacterium in your butt. You don't feel it. Sorry, Josephine. That's it, Josephine? It's like the bacteria in Josephine, you don't feel them, but they're there. You don't need to identify what they are or where they are. You just need to cleanse yourself from time to time, right? It's pretty much the same in the etheric body. What's important is to be aware of your fundamental parts, the ones that are part of you.
A question from the chat. How, when working with chakras or any other spiritual practice, can one avoid becoming prideful or falling into delusion? How can you prevent the growth of spiritual ego?
Spiritual ego and pride is when a person starts comparing themselves to others, saying things like, I am above them, we are the awakened, the good ones, and they are the bad ones. But in my course, you won't be able to do that. I simply don't allow it there. We immediately smack that spiritual pride on the nose with a shovel. Nothing like that will get through there. So you can confidently move in that direction. We won't let you become prideful there, because any pride stems from polarization. That is, if again the Manipura chakra is undeveloped, it is painful, it is damaged, and the energy does not flow from the Manipura chakra to the heart chakra, to the energy of love, then false love arises, a false self, false spirituality, when a person does not actually become spiritual, but only pretends to be spiritual, in other words, tries to behave like spiritual people, to imitate rather than to be, you understand, right? To to conform to an illusory stereotype, to fit into a mold. But I, for example, can swear. Can you imagine? So what? That doesn't make me an unspiritual person. It doesn't disconnect me from myself or from my feelings. On the contrary, I am aware of my feelings. I understand what I do, what I say, and when I do it consciously. So what? If I were to simply follow all of this formally and meticulously say, I absolutely do not consume any meat products, I never utter a single swear word, and I exclusively excrete pure air, delightful hearts, and vibrant rainbows, and I also urinate only sweet, refreshing water. Sorry, but that would be nonsense. It would be self-deception. It would be an attempt to wrap myself up in some illusory skin of pseudo-spirituality. 90% of what passes for spirituality now is like that, just a pretty cover. And nowadays, 90% of people judge by the cover and don't look any deeper. Spirituality is defined by not blindly imitating stereotype. It is defined by the depth of contact with your own soul, from the word spirit, spirituality, not from the word following illusions, but from the word spirit. Spirituality is the connection with yourself and with spirit through yourself, not through depriving yourself of pleasures, sitting in meditation for 3 hours, or fasting 10 times. There are people who say, I eat raw food, I fast, I do dry fasting, I keep silent for 10 days, I go to all sorts of retreats, I eat all these roots, vines, all sorts of things. So what? Well, what next? Okay, fine. So you're a vegetarian for 10 or 20 years. So did you become enlightened from that? A cow is a vegetarian too. So is a pig. Well, if you don't give it anything else, a horse is a vegetarian. Did it become enlightened? Faster than you? Number? A couple more questions, then we'll do a short meditation together and wrap up the broadcast.
Alright, question. How does spatial feedback work? Can external events be considered a response to an internal energetic message?
That's how it works. Of course, external events are the result of how your state is reflected in the field. Whatever your vibrations are, such is the state you attract to yourself.
Yes. What does complete disconnection from other people's imposed programs or thoughts give? Is it just silence, or is something new emerging inside?
You know, when you truly disconnect from other people's programs or their thoughts, it's incredibly important to thoughtfully ask yourself, what comes next in your journey? So, what comes next? And you shouldn't just aim to disconnect or break free from something. You need to understand why and what you are moving toward. If you're just trying to free yourself from something and run away, it doesn't work that way. You need to move towards something. So after breaking free from external patterns and outside control, you need to connect with yourself. Start communicating with yourself, with your soul, with your higher self. Then, when you establish a connection with yourself, harmony between your soul, spirit, and body begins to form, and you gain a freedom you have never experienced before.
A question from the chat. I can't have sex without love, and it takes a lot of time for me to fall in love. So what should I do with my sexual energy?
You know, I truly don't want to come across as impolite or disrespectful in any way, but it's important to understand that there are indeed a multitude of diverse and constructive ways through which you can effectively channel your sexual energy into productive and fulfilling endeavors. And you have at least one person you don't need to look for, whom you can love and with whom you can have sex. Even every day, if you want, and you don't need to look for anyone for that. I could tell you who this person is, but I think you'll figure it out yourself. You know, it's like that one time I asked my friend a question. I said to her, tell me, you're always alone, you just can't seem to find yourself a boyfriend. Why are you always by yourself? She replied, I'm a solo violin. I like it. I don't want any duets. You get what I mean, right? Friends, now we're going to do a short meditation together so you can feel your chakras, and after that we will wrap up this broadcast. I hope it was useful and interesting for you. Close your eyes, sit comfortably, and we'll meditate without music. Take a deep breath in and out. Shift your attention to the area of the first chakra, down at the base of your spine. Imagine a red apple there, a bright red apple. Picture the apple starting to spin and fill up with vibrant red energy. With every inhale and exhale, it becomes more and more red and scarlet. It spins around itself in any direction. Whatever way it spins is the right way. Your breathing is even, calm, and deep. Keep spinning the apple. Breathe. Don't laugh. Keep your attention within yourself. Imagine this apple filling up more and more with bright red color and shining. Its strength is being reinforced. And now this red energy begins to spread throughout your entire body. It spreads through your legs, your arms, your body, giving you a sense of strength and confidence. Good. Now we move up to just below the navel. This is the area of the Svadhisthana chakra. The sacral region, the lower abdomen. Imagine an orange there, a bright orange. Imagine it spinning slowly. Breathe, and with your breath, intensify the spinning of the orange. Feel how energy and pleasure accumulate within it. The orange spins faster, and pleasure fills it. It begins to glow. Take a breath in, breathe out, and let the orange energy flow throughout your entire body. Allow yourself to feel this energy. Good. Now shift your attention above your navel to the area of your solar plexus. Imagine a lemon there. A round, juicy, yellow little lemon. And it's so incredibly delicious. It smells absolutely wonderful. You spin this bright yellow lemon and fill it with the vibrant energy of pure joy. Feel how it smoothly spins faster and faster. Take a breath in, and as you exhale, let this yellow energy of joy spread through your whole body in a wave. Now shift your attention to the area of your heart. And here is a green bud, a green flower bud. It begins to spin, and we fill it with the energy of love. Inhale, exhale, it spins faster. Inhale, exhale, it spins even faster. Inhale, exhale. It opens like a flower in the heart, and on exhalation sends a wave of warm energy of love throughout the body. Fine. We take a breath and move higher. The throat area is blue in color, and a blue flower bud appears there. We take a breath. The bud rotates. It becomes more and more filled with blue energy. Exhalation. Inhale. Exhalation. And the bud opens. In the area of the throat chakra. And we transfer our attention to the area of the third eye in the center of the head, to the center between the eyebrows. And now a blue flower bud is forming there. A sensation of rotation begins in the center of the head. Feel it in the area between the eyebrows. Breathe. It's spinning. And on the exhale, the flower in the area of the third eye begins to open. Good. And now we shift our attention to the crown of the head, where there is a lotus flower bud. We begin to breathe and spin the lotus flower bud. And at some point, you feel it opening above your head. A pink-violet radiance spreads throughout the entire body. And now, breathe through the first chakra at the base, take a breath, and raise the energy from the first chakra up to the crown of your head. Good. Open your eyes. How are you feeling? Did you notice any difference? Did you feel anything? Working with the chakras regularly, every day, is like brushing your teeth in the morning and evening. If you do just this and nothing else, you don't need to distinguish or identify entities. You don't need deep work with a psychotherapist every day. This alone is enough for you. And many of your illnesses will leave your life, and many superabilities will open up on their own. I know from my own experience I've tested it. When I started my journey, I did only this practice, only chakra work, just that every day. And every day I observed how my state was changing. My affairs improved, my relationships got better, financial matters were resolved, and I experienced a state of love and harmony. That is, after these practices, the sensations are always incredible. And interestingly, when I did them before going to bed, I would get rested much faster, recover more quickly, in other words. The energy starts to flow and fill the body more and faster. If you learn the main essence of how this is done, how all these chakras are interconnected, you will have the opportunity to practice this regularly on your own. Yes, you can do this kind of meditation every day. But if you want to work through all the chakras in detail, if you practice this meditation, you probably want to, because certain blockages in the chakras will start to open up and painful traumas will come to the surface. To work with them, of course, you need to look deeper and examine each chakra in detail, its structure and its interconnection with the others. And we'll be able to go through all of that in detail together. That's all I have for now. Thank you all for joining this session today. And with that, I'll say goodbye for today.